office building. The Pentagon obviously has a central courtyard, not obviously, but it does. It has a central courtyard, and apparently the initial thought was that it had not, the tragedy had not pierced that deeply into it, but the latest reports were that indeed they were perilously close to the central courtyard of that building. We'll keep you posted on these developments as we get fresh information. Carl Quintanilla joins us now, and he has been looking into what corporate America is doing to ready itself for the resumption of business and how it is trying to get back on track. Carl?
Tyler, you look at some of those pictures and you get the idea of why things are so difficult, because a lot of the problem here is access.
by, or do you know where 5 World Trade Center is? Did you see that?
Not sure.
You're not
By
sure
the
about
time that we got out to West Street, we were basically hightailing it back to the truck because remember, we're not the media. We're not supposed to be. I don't know if, Vache, can you shoot down here and show us where the rest of the media is? At this traffic light, that's the deadline. That's it. You can't go past there if you are a member of the media.
Right.
And what we did, Vache, if you can turn east here for us, Jason and I walked this way, east. And I'm not sure which street this is, but we passed City Hall Park. We walked down Park Row, made a left down Pace University. We were over by Beekman Street. I mean, we literally walked Lower Manhattan and wrapped our way around back up to the World Trade Center wreckage. So by the time we exited out onto West Street and we were walking up to back where the truck is right now, we weren't doing much shooting. And there were certain areas where we did not feel comfortable shooting, let alone doing some kind of stand-up or a tease for a piece that we would file later. This was strictly an area where you realized that something sensitive was happening, something that if we were going to shoot something, it needed to be done quietly, and that's what we did.
Well, the biggest thing is that you guys are safe, and the people that are working in that area are working in a safe manner, and that appears to be the case.
That is the case, as far as we know, Louis.
Now, both you and John Schumer were out there yesterday. Something that you can't describe with pictures. Has the smell in the area changed as to whether or not this is that fires may still be burning? Is it asbestos? Is it concrete? Is it something else?
Yeah, I could speak on the smells that I've been down here the past 2 days, and honestly, Gary, it hasn't changed in the sense that it is the same. It is still an ashy smell. At no point yesterday, despite there was talk there was some methane leaks. At one point, we were actually live on the air when I was told to evacuate an area because of the potential of a methane explosion. We didn't smell methane then. We don't smell it today. At no point yesterday did I even smell any sort of the jet fuel. Obviously, these planes carry several tons of jet fuel, I would imagine, and we didn't smell any of that yesterday as well. It is just the constant smell of ash and of soot and of smoke from a standard fire. I wish there would be an easier way to say it, but that is simply the way it's been the last couple of days. Ashy, smoky, and nothing particularly out of the ordinary from a fire, but obviously this is extraordinary.
You know, some doctors are warning that smoke could pose a potential health risk. All the workers are wearing masks, and are you far enough away where you're not concerned about that?
I'm personally not concerned. Some other folks here in the media are wearing masks as a precaution. I just don't find it necessary from this vantage point. Again, we are several blocks away from the epicenter. In addition to just being several blocks away, we're also behind several tall buildings. So by the time the smoke gets to us, and it is getting to us, it is nothing remotely like what it was yesterday when the plumes of smoke were literally chasing us down, I guess it was Broadway, towards Battery Park. We were running at full speed. We were covered then. Obviously, then we were choking at points, difficulty breathing, but that is not the case, for at least for me today. Jay, I'm not sure how it was in the epicenter.
By the time we got to the epicenter, it was almost eerie because the smell had gone away. Up until that point, we were wearing our masks, and I'm not sure where mine is right now, but the outside of it is covered with some kind of resin. Obviously, the stuff that's in the air, a strong smell of sulfur as we got closer and closer to ground zero.
Gary?
All right, guys, this update now, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center now truly gone. The bottom 4 stories of the South Tower, all that remained following yesterday's terrorist attack, have collapsed. That in turn forced police to evacuate would-be rescuers from the area. There are no immediate reports of any injuries. Rescue workers spent the day burrowing through a mix of soot and rubble, hunting for bodies from the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil. The work in Lower Manhattan was interrupted by brief blessings. A fortunate victim was pulled alive from the wreckage of the steel and glass buildings. By this afternoon, 4 people, 3 police officers, and 1 unidentified woman were pulled alive from the wreckage pile where the 1,300-foot towers once stood. The eventual death toll, however, could reach the thousands. Gary?
Once again, New Yorkers are feeling a sense of vulnerability, not just New Yorkers as average citizens, but also a law enforcement community as well. Joining us here now is New York One's Carrie Lyon, and she's here to tell us about some of the security concerns that New Yorkers are faced with today. Gary.
Well, Gary and Louis, whether you live in Lower Manhattan or you live way up in the Bronx, the ripple effects of this tragedy are being felt citywide. Security is at an all-time high, with law enforcement officials having two goals in mind. One, to keep you safe. The other, to make you believe you're safe. By early morning, Manhattan streets resembled a war zone. By midday, so did the highways. On a state of high alert, law enforcement agencies aren't taking any chances.
Step back from Mateo, please, so we get a little organization here.
Closing government offices, deploying officers to what seems like every Manhattan block, and shutting down the area below 14th Street altogether.
Ma'am, you cannot film over here. You have to go down to 5th Avenue.
It's not just the New York City Police Department you'll find, but state and federal law enforcement officers and police from just about everywhere. 500 from Nassau County, 2 from Coleman, Michigan.
You just never can have enough help here, so we're just glad to be here and help out however we can.
Of course, the attack on the World Trade Center came by air. That's being guarded as well by the USS Washington aircraft carrier in the waters off New York City. While all of this security is meant to protect us, experts say it serves another purpose too.
They are routine security measures at a time like this because they make the public feel safer.
Get out of the street, please.
On Broadway at the Bronx border, traffic was snarled for miles as police teams searched each and every van, SUV, and commercial vehicle entering Manhattan. Despite long waits, no one we talked with complained.
It's fine. It's reasonable. I mean, under the circumstances, for sure.
How does the police presence make you feel?
Safer.
We understand that, what happened. We feel very sad.
Eventually, these streets will all reopen and all of these people will go back to wherever they're from. But security experts say things will never really be the same.
Aviation security is bound to be revised as a result of this. And there will be a number of measures that will be created. One certainly is going to be to seal off the cockpit in a more secure way than it has been up until now.
And expect much tighter security at airports themselves, maybe even with pre-flight screening of passengers and armed sky marshals riding along on flights. Measures that may infringe upon our liberties, but save lives. Now, as for the police on our streets, nobody could tell us today just how long all of these people are going to be here, just how long the streets are going to be closed and government offices are going to be closed. But certainly this is one of those situations where New Yorkers probably aren't in any rush to get these long
as the actual hijackers. And there is evidence gathered by the FBI that reaches all the way to Florida, that at a flight school there, 2 of the suspected hijackers took flight training to the tune of $25,000 each, beginning over a year ago, learning to fly twin-engine light aircraft, which would give them basic skills necessary to get behind the controls of a 757 or 767, in the opinion of experts, once those planes were airborne, and be able to guide them with some precision, some hideous precision that we saw yesterday in those tapes. So that is roughly where we stand right now with the day's developments.
A few notes. The chopper that we showed you just a little while ago, where we told you President Bush was in there visiting the Pentagon, apparently we were mistaken. He was not on that chopper. He is expected to visit the Pentagon by motorcade. Other airport news, Brian Thompson appears to have some new travel information, and he's at Newark Airport. Brian?
Yes, indeed. We've just gotten word from the Port Authority. They've told me that about 7:30 this evening, the first diverted flights should start landing at the 2 major international airports for New York, that, of course, being Newark, where I am right now, and also Kennedy. The breakdown we get at this point is they're expecting
to find anyone coming to you or saying anything in New York that's negative?
No, it's not like that, What happened yesterday made all of us so upset. We don't know why they act against Arabic people. I was over there yesterday. I was in front of the World Trade Center when everything happened. I saw everything by my eyes. I was so scared. I was so upset. Why they do this? Why? We're all human. It can't be Arabic people. We're all human. We're all having blood. Why do they want to destroy other people?
I'm going to interrupt you because I'm going to ask you a question real quickly. A lot of people are watching right now, and they're going to say, how do we know? How do we believe? believe them. I believe you. Obviously, we're here on Fox News. We believe you. How do you explain this? How do you, and I've asked every New Yorker this. Can you understand this at all?
What is going on now, we don't have any evidence who did it, and we don't know. But the first people there always saying that they are the one who did it are the Arabs. Especially, it seems like right now they associate Islam with terrorism, which Islam has nothing to do with terrorism. We are against terrorism, and we don't support it.
Thank you very much. And you did all give blood today.
Yes,
and
yes.
I know you all send your love and regards to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for coming up to us.
God bless America.
Thank you. Thank you. I also want to show you one thing. I've been talking all day about my close friend. I've been showing pictures all day. We will continue to do that. I have finally gotten a picture of my friend Neil Levin, my very dear friend. He is the director of the Port Authority. I also have a picture with him here with his wife, another very dear friend of mine. And a lot of people know Christy Farah and Neil Levin. He's a very, very handsome man. His wife called me at 3 this morning, like so many people. So many people. I wasn't home. I was out working. My husband said, have faith. Christy, I know you're watching, and I know everyone that's watching. And John said it, Linda said it, we're all saying it. Have hope. Don't give up hope. We're all working, and we're going to have a lot more pictures for you. I don't know. Do we have time for one more? Yes, we do? Okay, come on over here with me. Who is this?
This is my brother.
And this is your brother. His name was Edward?
Peter.
Edward
Mardikian.
Mardikian. And he was in World Tower 1?
Tower 1, the windows on the world, the top floor.
And did you get any communication with him?
We did. He called his wife right after the plane hit, and he said he was okay, and it was smoky, but we haven't heard from him since.
Again, we're telling everyone Fox has, and I'll tell you as soon as we get off the air, we have a website. You can put this picture on the website, and also we're telling everyone, just for your own security, that you can tell if anybody sees him, they will go to a police officer. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, that's all. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
Good luck. And you just can see it. It just doesn't stop. We're not giving. None of us are giving up hope. We're in there. Now back to you guys.
All right, thank you very much, Penny. I would just point out, we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, the speculation about who is behind this acts of terrorism. We thought, remember there was a lot of speculation in Oklahoma, and that turned out to be a man by the name of Timothy McVeigh.
An American.
So this is not time for speculation. Let's go now to Bob DeCastro. Bob.
Hey, John, I have Rosanna Scotto by my side now, too, and it seems like we have some of the same information about that building that could be on the verge of collapse. We're hearing that it could be 200 Vesey Street, and also...
Which is also, you have to understand, One Liberty Plaza, I'm hearing it's the back end of Liberty, so it's all the same area, it's the same building. One side is VC, the other side is Liberty Plaza, and what I've heard basically is that there's a buckle in the building. And we were just at the downtown hospital over here, and there were some police officers in wheelchairs. They were on VC Street, and they said all of a sudden people just panicked and started running, and 2 of the police officers were trampled. They're okay, but there's obviously a lot of commotion going on right now, and they are keeping an eye on that building.
And I have heard the same thing, and I've also heard that there are structural engineers who are on site, and they're using some sort of a tool that can determine whether or not the building is bowing or bending or teetering one way or the other by as little as a quarter of an inch.
Right. With us right now, we have some policemen from Brooklyn Narcotics. They don't usually do this. They don't usually get too dirty. But your job obviously is very important. Tell me where you were and what's going on.
Well, we were right down at the World Trade Center, and we were there from about 4 o'clock this morning. And we were just basically digging and looking for people.
Did you find anybody?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, basically everybody was deceased. That a lot of body parts. It's pretty sad.
You're very broken up about it, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's literally as a person just pulling piece after piece of debris. Is that what you all are doing?
Yes, we had long lines of people, and we just handed,
You can't imagine what it looks like there.
What does it look like? Describe it as best as you can.
War zone. Looks like a war zone. It's just miles and it looks like miles and miles of rubble.
But knowing those are some of your colleagues there, knowing some of your friends, and does it make it all the more difficult to do this?
It doesn't make it more difficult. It makes you want to do it more.
More eager.
You want to get there, you know.
I think that's what drives you to keep you going, knowing that your brothers are in there, and firemen, police officers, and families, you know, civilians that have families at home watching on TV, hoping to see them again, and that's what keeps us going.
We have friends that are in there. We know people that are in there. So that's what brings.
You're from Staten Island.
We're from Staten
right?
Island. Yes, a lot of people work from Staten Island, the financial district. Big commuters from the ferry come over, big area. I have one friend of mine. I haven't been able to identify. He was one of the early engine companies that arrived here. Works in Manhattan as a fireman. The family has no word on him yet. We have other people that we know that we're concerned about.
What did you see down there?
You know, best to describe it would be something you would see in a movie. I mean, it's very surreal. It's just rubble, twisted metal, boulders, rocks, pieces of, you couldn't even describe. I mean, there's vehicles that have been trampled by, covered by buildings that don't even resemble fire trucks.
It was strange. We got here last night. We got here about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There was one engine company that was, the truck was still pumping. It was a burned out Hulk, the truck. There's nothing left there, but the engine was still running. It was still pumping water. It was still using the hand lines. Wow. And you just knew the firemen weren't coming back to that truck.
Can you describe how large spread the debris has been and how high it is? We're hearing stories like it could be as high as 8.
It's about 5 stories. It's about 5 stories high. If you take 110 stories and you stack it 5 stories high, crush it together. That's what it looks like. It doesn't look like the World Trade Center down there. Nothing doesn't look like a tourist attraction that you used to.
You're a volunteer fireman, right?
That's correct, yes.
And so you saw it on the news and you just hopped on over here?
Yes, we did. We have friends of ours that are from the Liberty, Pennsylvania Fire Company Search and Rescue Squad. One of the guys used to be a New York City emergency service cop. He brought down the rescue squad guys. We loaded them into one of our apparatus with all their equipment, and some of our volunteers are here with them. FDNY gave us an engine company. We're pumping all day with one engine company. Split up our teams. Basically, whatever has to be done, if they ask us to do it, we'll do it. That's
now,
it.
Let me ask you, were any of you just around VC Street or Liberty Plaza when they told tell me what happened when everybody got the word to get out of there?
Run.
Everybody just started running down the street, you know, grabbing onto each other and making sure everybody got out, you know.
Guys who fell, just grabbing onto them, dragging them to wherever you thought was safe.
Did you see that structurally, was it teetering one way or the other?
It was 3 loud blasts of a horn, and that means get out.
Get out of there. Everybody
got out.
One of our partners fell down, and we had to carry him out of there. And, you know, when you're just thinking of getting him out, getting yourself out, and make sure get your partners out so that they're okay.
Especially after what happened yesterday. Now, I don't know if you're hearing this, but what I'm hearing is because of where this building is, they are concerned that it's going to knock down another building. Have you guys heard anything about that?
Yes, we've heard those rumors, but we can't confirm anything because our radio frequency is different. We can't contact anybody. We had to evacuate our apparatus from the crash zone. So right now we're without any information.
You're waiting to hear too. We're also hearing that they want people to move back several blocks, but we're in a safe area.
We're in the safe area now.
You're safe right now where you are. They moved us out of there to keep us safe. And basically they had to give up all this search and rescue right now, unfortunately, because of this pending collapse of this other building.
That had to kill you, being right there in the middle, trying to rescue people, and then being told to leave immediately.
It destroys you, because now you have to leave. You're leaving your brothers there. You're leaving family members there, and
how about good stories? Are there any stories of you finding people alive? I mean,
well, the fact that the fire department, the police department, there were doctors there, volunteers there, all working together in long lines, passing debris from the top down, and construction workers in Suffolk County, people from Ohio, everybody lining up.
2 or 3 police officers that were found. They heard gunshots. I guess they were doing it as a distress signal, and they recovered these 3 or 4 police officers alive. So that gives us, you know, a little more.
Did you all see that happen?
We didn't see it. We just heard it over the radio.
That 3 cops were recovered alive.
So are these stories that circulate around that keep you guys
if you look at the location, you wouldn't think that anybody could survive. You know, so to have, you know, a few police officers survive, and hopefully firemen, you know.
People at home that are watching, what would you like to tell them about what's going on here? What impressed you most about what's going on?
How everybody's working together.
Yeah, the teamwork.
It's amazing. You know,
over the years, we've heard a lot of
strangers, civilians,
harmony
people
between
just coming in.
uniformed services in the city.
And one thing I think after today, I don't think there'll be ever any disharmony again between anybody.
So if anything, this has brought the entire community, I mean, everybody together.
General public in general. I mean, people just coming up out of nowhere, have a sandwich, have a drink. Here's
There are
something.
people out there volunteering that walked up out of nowhere and they're hauling debris out there. They're working on the line.
No doubt. Firefighters, cops, EMS, nurses, doctors, everybody working together. Volunteer civilians coming up to you, handing you bottles of water, handing you food from everywhere. Yeah.
All throughout, looks like up and down the East Coast.
Connecticut and all over.
Massachusetts.
Suffolk, Nassau.
So it's amazing.
Yeah, good. Amazing.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope you can get back in there and find the people you're looking for. And thank you for your hard work. I know you guys are really going beyond the call of duty. Thank you.
Rosanna, can you hear me?
Well, you hear
Rosanna?
these stories. I mean, the more you walk around, you see hero after hero. They don't want to be called heroes. I mean, they feel this motivation to go there and help find the people they work with and family members. And
they hear just one person has been saved, and it makes all the difference, and it really drives them.
But this is really driving them crazy right now because they were.
Of governments, government participation with resources, with worldwide intelligence access. All of this is the meat for the investigators starting today.
Late this afternoon, the FBI director did confirm that 3 to 6 hijackers were on board each of the 4 planes and that they used knives and box cutters to commandeer the jetliners. The FBI says its investigation has already made significant progress.
We have, in the last 24 hours, taken the manifests and used those as an evidentiary base, and have talked to many of the families of the victims, and have successfully, I believe, identified many of the hijackers on each of the 4 flights that went down.
And helping to identify those hijackers were this Florida couple. This morning, they got a knock on their door from the FBI asking them about 2 students who stayed with them last summer while attending a nearby flight school.
They told me that that these 2 persons were involved, and it was believed that they were some of the individuals that had been involved in the takeover of the aircraft that went into the World Trade Center.
And in Boston, SWAT teams entered this downtown hotel. It's uncertain whether the hijackers stayed there. Investigators also have seized this car at Logan Airport. Inside, reportedly an Arabic language flight manual and an aviation fuel chart. And just across the Hudson River in Fort Lee, the FBI are searching a mailboxes, etc. in a strip mall. Its connection to the terrorist strike is uncertain. Meanwhile, unidentified federal authorities tell ABC News that some of those hijackers responsible for the worst terrorist act in history may have entered the country at the Canadian border. Last November, an Eyewitness News investigation disclosed that nearly half of all border checkpoints in the Canadian-New York line are unguarded during the night. Custom inspectors told us back then it was an open invitation to terrorists.
You can be within the United States and deep within the United States in half an hour and have never seen a law enforcement agency of any sort.
While investigators try to determine whether bin Laden is the mastermind behind history's worst terrorist strike, there's no denying this kind of devastation was the evil fruit of months, perhaps years of training.
This took training, this took support. This is not something they practiced just on a computer with a joystick. This was something that was practiced in the air for months. This is a well-planned, well-executed act of war.
Authorities say they have not yet made any arrest in this investigation. We should note that this massive probe is also reaching into cyberspace. 2 major internet providers have been served with surveillance orders by the FBI. Bill and Diane.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. We want to take a quick look at what's opened, what's closed. Let's go to Sandra Bookman. She's in the newsroom. Sandra?
That's right, Diana. The mayor has been pushing for a return to normalcy tomorrow. New York Public Schools will open 2 hours late. Teachers and staff should show up on time. Those are the schools above 14th Street in Manhattan. All Catholic schools in the city will reopen except for those below, below 14th Street. As for the money markets, there is a plan that they reopen on Monday. There may be on Friday, but it's likely Monday would be the soonest. Federal and state courts in Manhattan are the only ones closed tomorrow. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Sandra. We wanted
Now, what about 5? That collapse. Did you hear or see anything with that building?
I'm sorry, 5, I've heard I heard a half hour ago it came down. I think it came partially down. And then someone told me 5 minutes ago that it's completely down. But, Louis, that is conjecture at best. Word heard on the street, nothing official. And I can't say that I heard. There's lots of loud noises around here, trucks, the rafting of the FDR Drive itself. Every noise kind of makes you jump around here. But I have no information about 5 World Trade Center.
And we saw rescue crews with John Schumo shot going closer to the scene, not in any deliberate fashion, but he seems to indicate it was like a shift change. Can you see any of that?
No, Louis, again, this is a slightly different situation from John's.
Your vantage point is different, but I didn't know whether you saw any peripheral movement over there.
No, the biggest contrast, I was just over on the West Side Highway, and there are emergency vehicles that extend all the way down from his location, basically to the scene. From where I am, except for, I think, 2 fire trucks, no real presence of emergency vehicles. Again, a feeling that emergency workers are being moved out of the scene. Most of them, many of them, I should say, are in my immediate area right now. They're awaiting word what to do next, but they're also confirming that this building is reported to be on the verge of collapsing.
Okay, now, Greg, we have a guest that's pretty familiar with what's going on out there, or at least familiar with the framework of what's going on out there. So just hold on. We'll talk to him and then get back with you.
Joining us now is Dr. Charles Jennings from John Jay College. This is complicated work, as we've mentioned before. There is a whole process, though, to sort of this haphazard frenzy in trying to get to people, correct?
Absolutely. The difficulties that are faced here are really unprecedented because of the nature and magnitude of the event itself, as well as the density of the building all around the complex. We're not talking about, as we had with the Murrah Federal Building, an isolated, relatively small, mid-rise structure with parking lots on a couple of sides and some peripheral buildings. This is highly sophisticated. We have all these layers of utilities, which on a good day is always a battle to know where all the gas lines and electric lines are running. We have all the secondary damage from the collapse of the World Trade Center towers on these other structures. And underlying all this is this great sense of urgency to proceed with rescue operations. While this is going on, there should be ongoing assessments being made of the structural conditions of the buildings. Engineers should be in there in some cases, and I'm not aware, fully briefed on everything that's going on down on the scene at the moment, but actually we'll use surveying instruments and line up on the buildings and monitor those in real time. And so what we've seen today with personnel being pulled back and going back in is normal, particularly given the complexity of this scene.
We've seen scenes from around the world in the last 2 years.
In a public show of unity to condemn the attack on the United States. Air travel was grounded for a second day as airlines prepared to resume some flying under strict new security. The U.S. financial markets were closed again, but the United States and our allies vowed that these acts of terror will not destabilize the world economy. Federal investigators are following hundreds of leads tonight to try to find out who was behind the attacks and bring them to justice. Some aspects of the disaster go on. Take a look at this picture. Just a short time ago, another of the buildings damaged in the attack on the World Trade Center in downtown Manhattan finally surrendered in a kind of slow-motion collapse. The building apparently was damaged by the collapse of the nearby Twin Towers. Also today, the last standing portion of the South Tower collapsed. Now to one of the headline stories of this day, the White House saying that President Bush apparently was an intended target of the terrorists. CBS's John Roberts is at the White House tonight. John?
Dan, as a further explanation as to why the president traveled all the way to Nebraska before heading back to Washington late yesterday, officials today revealed that they had a specific and credible threat against the president's life aboard Air Force One.
Federal agents respond immediately. More than 4,000 FBI special agents and 3,000 support staff already on the case, sweeping the nation for evidence from fragments at the scene of the attacks to any documentary proof of what the suspected terrorists were up to. Between 3 and 6 per plane, authorities now say.
The United States Attorney's Office's terrorism units
and the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces are obtaining the passenger manifests, rental car receipts, telephone logs, videotape from parking garages, and pay telephone videotape records at all scenes for review and appropriate follow-up interviews.
Scrutiny of those passenger lists leads the FBI to this flight school in Florida, where officials say they believe at least 2 of the terrorists received pilot training during the past year. A man who worked at the flight school says he allowed both of them, who described themselves as Germans, to briefly live with him and his wife.
While they were here, I know that they had used this address initially, and I know that because I would get insurance renewals for them addressed to them at this address for that call.
In Boston, agents swarm area hotels where registration records match suspicious names from passenger lists of the hijacked planes, detaining at least 3 people for further questioning, holding them now on immigration charges. And in a hugely helpful break, the FBI impounds a car found at the airport after a witness says it was driven by 2 Arabic men. In it, authorities say they discover airplane technical documents. Federal agents also stop an Amtrak train in Rhode Island today, part of a frantic nationwide effort, the FBI says, to make certain no other conspirators remain at large where they could mount further attacks.
Our first effort is to identify any associates in the United States who might be related to the hijackers and to remove those associates, investigate, and arrest, given the evidence, those individuals, and to remove any threat to the air system in the future.
Among others,
15 sites throughout the state. Counselors are trained to provide help to adults and children. Their number.
Small shoulder bag, not a real bulky one, but something small. Both kind of dark complected, dark hair.
Peter, there are dozens of leads FBI agents are working on. No one has been arrested, but several people have been detained for questioning. By one estimate, as many as 50 people may have been involved in helping provide the network for the terrorists to operate in this country over the last year. Peter.
Thank you very much, Brian Ross, who's been working on the investigation. I don't think anybody's been working harder on this investigation than John Miller has, who has been with us day and night on this. So take this and enlarge it or add to it as you will in terms of what we really think is going on today.
Well, the roundup, and I don't mean the roundup of people, the roundup of what's going on in the investigation, 3 are being held in Boston. We'll get back to them. 3 were arrested or detained. There are some semantics here. From a train in Providence, Rhode Island, being held on immigration charges.
This is where Amtrak was actually stopped and people were taken off and people were
Federal agents boarded the plane, identified these people and have detained them. FBI agents in Newark are looking for the trail of several men they believe who departed on that flight from Newark to San Francisco. So what you see is the FBI is assuming that there are 12 to 25 or 26 hijackers, depending on if each flight had 3 or 6, are presumed dead in the crashes. But they are seeing traces that there were other people, associates, support people left behind. Now, what they're doing is something they've done before. Right around the Millennium celebration, when they felt that there was an imminent attack, they used the immigration laws to sweep out through Boston, again, ironically, and other cities, and pick up people who were on their watch lists, who they had information and tips about. Today in Boston, you see this dramatic scene unfolding. A heavily armed Boston SWAT team entering the Westin Hotel just off Boylston Street in Copley Plaza. This came about when FBI agents followed the paper trail from that car at the airport, the car they believe the hijackers used, to a hotel. They were not expecting.
From that firm, who called his parents, told them he loved them, and they haven't heard from him since.
There are stories like it everywhere. People, knowing they are about to die, calling home to say, "I love you." People running for their lives and then stopping to carry a stranger to safety. The story here is that what prevailed in the final moment, in the face of death, is not fear or hate, but love and courage. Candy Crowley, CNN, Washington.
And those are the stories that bring us down and lift us up at the same time. Our Jonathan Karl was reporting just a little while ago, and I also was talking with Senate Democratic leader Tom Daschle a minute ago about appropriations to pay for the cleanup, the crisis of this crisis. I'm told that the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee is reporting that now the House and the Senate have agreed on a figure of $20 billion, an emergency supplemental payment that would be spent at the desire of the administration, the White House, to deal with the crisis. The House and Senate are going to take this supplemental up tomorrow. They plan to have it on President Bush's desk by the end of business, by the end of the day tomorrow. Aaron, back to you in New York.
Judy, thank you. We continue to keep our eye just to the left of what was Building 7, this large gray building, One Liberty Plaza. When we first heard the concern that this building might come down, we saw windows and facing on the west side, the right side of your screen popping out. Now we can see, and we suspect you can as well. Yes, indeed. Some of the windows now further to the east, more to the center of the building, on the seam line there, starting to pop out also. A large number of ambulances, 1, 2, 3 that I can see, 4, 5, 6, 7 at least that I can see, have moved into the area, moving towards the area as we talk to you now. People have been pulled out, though there is still, and Danny, I'm not sure if you can see it or not on the shot you're on, there's still a fair number of fire officials in that blown out area that is was a street yesterday and is now just a kind of wasteland there just ahead of the fire truck. There's still a fair number of people there, and we watched that building. And just for a moment, think about the implications here. That building, if it collapses, causes collateral damage. If that building doesn't collapse, but remains a danger to collapse, the rescue operation, if not totally shut down, is largely shut down. Now, I'm sure smarter people than I are figuring out how they're going to deal with this, but they have an enormous problem, about a 60-story problem, just to the east of the Trade Center. Some of the most fascinating reporting that we have heard today has come from CNN's Miles O'Brien. Miles has been following the flight paths and whatever information on board the 4 hijacked airplanes he could gather as he worked his sources and his computer and the rest. Miles joins us in Atlanta now with more on the detail, some cases shocking detail, of what he's been able to learn. Miles?
Shocking, horrifying, it all applies when you start looking at these 4 doomed flights, Aaron. Take a look here. This is the track of the 2 flights which left Boston. They were headed to the West Coast. Ultimately, of course, they ended up right near where Aaron is, striking the World Trade Center, eventually leveling them. Those flight paths are somewhat more clear-cut when you consider the goals of the terrorists. The flight that has caused us great interest today is this one, United Airlines Flight 93, which left from Newark Airport, made it as far as Cleveland, and did a 180-degree turn and seemed to be heading in toward the Baltimore-Washington area. Unclear what the target was, but the question that has been on our minds all day long is, why did this plane crash here? Was there perhaps some sort of struggle inside the cockpit of that particular aircraft? And we do know more about that now. But first, let me tell you a little bit about some of the other flights and what was going on board.
Nothing seemed amiss when American Airlines Flight 11 left the runway in Boston Tuesday morning. The 767-200 was about half full, toting 81 passengers, a cockpit crew of 2, and 9 flight attendants to the opposite coast. The captain likely planned for a 5-hour flight, so there was roughly 8,500 gallons of jet fuel in its 3 tanks. FAA radars tracked the airliner as it followed the flight plan. But then, about 20 minutes into the flight, somewhere over upstate New York, it turned sharply to the south. Flight 11 was hijacked, apparently by knife-wielding men. Airline pilots are trained to handle such situations by keeping calm, complying with requests, and if possible, dialing in an emergency 4-digit code on a device called a transponder. It transmits crucial flight data to air traffic controllers. The action takes seconds, but it appears no such code was entered. But in the cabin, a frantic flight attendant managed to use a phone to call American Airlines Command Center in Dallas. She reported the trouble, and according to the Christian Science Monitor, a pilot apparently keyed the microphone, transmitting a cockpit conversation. The hijackers could be heard saying, "We have more planes, we have more planes." Radio transmissions like this would have been recorded on the ground by the FAA.
The police have identified 5 suspects that they believe were involved with this terrorist act, and 2 of whom may be brothers, apparently, reportedly. 2 of whom, 2 others, may have flown in from Portland and originated in Canada.
About 5 minutes before Flight 11 started heading south, another 767, United Flight 175, left Boston, also for Los Angeles, 65 souls aboard. 15 minutes after becoming airborne, it veered off course. One passenger made 2 calls to his father. In one exchange, he said a flight attendant was stabbed. In the second call, he told his dad the plane was going down.
They knew not to carry guns on the airplane. If they fired off a bullet, I mean, they could have had explosive decompression on the aircraft. They knew what they were doing, and they knew what their mission was, obviously.
We know what happened next. The 767 struck and ultimately leveled the World Trade Center's Twin Towers.
I know pilots. No, if you're going to die, you're not going to fly in a World Trade Center to do it. Yeah, there would be a struggle, major struggle.
Which brings us to the story of Jeremy Glick. Jeremy Glick was a passenger on board United Airlines Flight 93. Newark to Los Angeles was the intended destination. According to his family, he made a phone call after the plane became commandeered somewhere around here in the Cleveland area. He asked them to confirm reports that other passengers had heard from talking to their family members that, in fact, the plane had already crashed into the World Trade Center here in the New York area. When that was confirmed by his family, he dropped the phone for some time, came back to report to his family that the male passengers on board United Airlines Flight 93 had voted to attack the hijackers. Dropped the phone again, and the rest we can only surmise. But this flight did not make it to what appeared to be its intended target, the Washington, D.C. area. If you're looking for heroes, the passengers on board that plane, obviously now perished, would be them. Aaron?
Miles, there can be no shortage of heroes here as we keep our eye on One Liberty Plaza, about 8 blocks from where we are, as windows continue to pop out of that building. Just in the last 5 minutes or so, another half-dozen ambulances have moved in. Look, I can't honestly tell you that these ambulances that I now see were not in another part of the staging area too close to that building and have been moved around several blocks and back down. That is certainly possible. It is also possible that they are very concerned that this building's coming down, and they want to make sure that they can treat the people who might be hurt. Now, which one of those possibilities, I honestly can't tell you. I can tell you that there is a sea of ambulances down there. Patty Davis has been covering today transportation questions. I think all of us have known that flying, at least in the near term, is not going to be the same, and in fact the rules are changing. Patty, good evening.
Certainly changing, Aaron. The FAA has said that it is now accepting flight plans from some commercial airlines to get back in the air. Now, that only applies to a limited number of flights, those that were diverted yesterday when these
because it went crazy, because we're definitely working for something, and it's something for freedom and justice, and that's what we were here for.
I just got chills when you said that myself. So someone actually put the American flag, someone climbed into the rubble and unfurled the flag.
It was a construction worker that was helping us out, or helping out the team, and he climbed up there, and everybody just stood and watched. Everybody dropped everything and just watched the guy put the flag up and tie it around the light pole. And
a round of applause and back to work.
That's right.
that flag serve as motivation throughout the day, I'm assuming?
It did, and not only that flag, but everybody started putting flags around the buildings and everything, and so there's a lot of American flags down at the Ground Zero site where everything's going on.
Chris, thank you for your time. And finally, I want to bring in Kurt as we make our way around. Kurt, we've heard so many amazing stories just the past 2 days. You have 4 gentlemen here sharing in some of those stories, images that you will never forget.
Well, I think the biggest image of all is everybody working together so well as a team. The organization's incredible. The individuals are just, I mean, so positive. Everybody's, instead of being uptight and tense, everybody's really working together and working really well as a team. I think the organization of the firefighters with the police is incredible, how smoothly they're all working together to get anybody who's surviving out. I mean, they brought in the rescue dogs. It's just incredible, the spirit of everybody working. I mean, it's very, very positive. I mean, the devastation is just total. It's just incredible. I mean, but everybody is very positive and, working as hard as they can just to clear it out.
I'm sure some of our viewers are watching at home thinking, why would anyone volunteer to enter a debris field and witness things that they will never be able to forget? Why did you do it?
Well, it's just the thought of maybe, having people that are in there, I could relate maybe how their families must feel. And I've lived in earthquake zones, so I can imagine what it must feel like that some people that, potentially are still trapped in the rubble. Anything I could do to make a difference in that to help them get out as soon as possible, I'm there to do.
Kurt, thank you. We all thank you. The city of New York thanks you. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Just one of the several stories here, Lewis and Gary, that we've been hearing all day long. Ordinary people volunteering to do extraordinary things. Gary, Lewis, back to you.
It certainly is something else. Thanks a lot, John. Well, it's busy there. It's been busy at the hospitals, too. None more than Bellevue. New York One's Dominic Carter is standing by there with the latest on that side of the story. Dominic?
Kids adjust as much as possible without making them as afraid as the adults are.
That firefighter who came out and spoke with us a few minutes ago said that he too now is afraid. In the past hour, 3 more buildings collapsed, we've been told, around the disaster site. When that happened, the rescue workers were pulled out. That firefighter told us the longer he's unable to do his job, the less likely it becomes they will find more survivors. Dan, many people will pray tonight that firefighter is wrong.
Byron Pitts. The word came late today from Wall Street, only blocks from the lower Manhattan disaster site. The stock markets will be closed again tomorrow and possibly the rest of this week. CBS's business correspondent Anthony Mason tells us what this may mean. Anthony?
Dan, the bond market will reopen tomorrow, but concerned about the damage to infrastructure, much of Wall Street will not go back to business. The stock markets will remain closed for a 3rd straight day because, as the head of the SEC, Harvey Pitt, put it, we didn't want to promise something we couldn't deliver.
Drowned in debris, Wall Street was a deserted corridor again today. The head of the New York Stock Exchange could promise only that markets
will resume operations no later than Monday.
Dick Grasso said Wall Street still had concerns about the soundness of structures, access to buildings, and power supply.
The conduits that sit beneath the streets of lower Manhattan have been subjected to the equivalent of several mini earthquakes when those 2 towers came down.
Many major financial firms had their offices damaged or destroyed in the attack, but the damage to physical capital was only part of the story.
I worry a little bit more about the human capital, the expertise that was probably lost. We can rebuild a building and install computer screens, but to train the kind of people who were probably lost there yesterday, that will take some time.
The investment firm Morgan Stanley had 3,500 employees in the World Trade Center. Today, on its Times Square ticker, instead of stock quotes, the company ran employee helpline numbers. CEO Philip Purcell said this morning the vast majority were safe.
It is not a good story, but we think it's going to be much less bad than it appeared during the day yesterday.
But in a broadcast to his employees, he appeared to choke up.
And we're going to be fine.
But will the U.S. economy be fine? World markets have been highly volatile in the aftermath of the attack, amid concerns about the country that has been the engine of the global economy.
I think there's a lot of caution amongst investors around the world now as they try to understand just how much the US public, how much that engine of growth could have been knocked off its track.
One encouraging sign, the European markets rebounded today, and the finance ministers and central bankers of the Group of 7 nations issued a joint statement vowing the global economy will not be disrupted. Dan?
Anthony, with all of it, there are estimates that as many as 10 to 15, perhaps as many as 20,000 people were in the World Trade Center at the time that the Twin Towers came down. Tonight, there's a surprising piece of news out of the White House. Administration officials are claiming that Air Force One and the White House itself were in fact targets of the terrorist attacks, and that explains some of the president's diversionary action yesterday, flying from Florida to Louisiana and then on to Omaha. NBC's Campbell Brown is at her post in Washington tonight. Campbell, what's the latest there?
Well, Tom, the president has been facing criticism from both Democrats and Republicans for being away from Washington in the aftermath of the attacks. Well, tonight, the White House is on the defensive. Officials here claiming now that the president's life was in danger, but offering little information to back up that claim. Today, as the president gathers with his national security team to plan the U.S. response, administration officials make a startling announcement.
We have real incredible information that the airplane that landed at the Pentagon was originally intended to hit the White House.
According to military sources, the plane, which took off from Dulles Airport, first flew past the Pentagon, heading instead for the U.S. Capitol. The plane flew over the Capitol, then circled toward the White House. Officials say its intended target. What's unclear, why the plane kept going, crashing finally into the Pentagon. Officials also say Air Force One was a target, information they learned as the president was en route from Florida to Louisiana's Barksdale Air Force Base. That's why they say the president was shuttled to yet another Air Force base in Nebraska, with fighter jets escorting the plane. But what exactly was the threat?
I'm not indicating what form it came in, John, and it will not.
Today, as new information about the attacks pours in, the president signals the administration's first priority to make sure the rest of the world supports the U.S. in whatever action Bush decides to take.
This enemy attacked not just our people, but all freedom-loving people everywhere in the world. The United States of America will use all our resources to conquer this enemy. We will rally the world.
At the White House today, security eases somewhat. Tourists are allowed back in. The First Lady visits with victims of the Pentagon attack at a local hospital. In a show of unity, the president invites congressional leaders from both parties to the White House and asks for their support in funding relief efforts. The nasty budget fight for the moment forgotten as Democrats pledge their help.
It is our strong desire to do this not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans.
Now, regarding the White House claim that Air Force One was a target, officials here were asked the question today, do they believe that the plane that crashed in Pittsburgh may have been the plane targeting Air Force One? Officials would only say that they have no information about the mission of that fourth plane. Tom?
All right, NBC's Campbell Brown at the White House tonight. Now let's go to the Pentagon, still reeling from the attack that killed perhaps as many as 200 people yesterday. Military officials are working tonight on a plan to retaliate, and they're trying to reorganize themselves in the midst of all of their grieving as well. NBC's Jim Miklaszewski joins me once again from the Pentagon. Jim?
Tom, tonight, rescue workers here have given up all hope of finding anyone else alive as the Pentagon becomes one giant crime scene.
An army of FBI agents descends on Ground Zero, gathering up bits and pieces of possible evidence. But 24 hours after the attack here, nerves remain on razor's edge. The mere sight of a large plane in the distance sends people running for cover. The scene remains grim. There are no signs of life detected beneath the tons of rubble. The area remains too unstable for rescue workers to even get close, but there's little hope anyone is left alive. The Pentagon now estimates that between 150 to 200 people are killed, including those aboard the plane that slammed into the Pentagon. Tracy Rowenhorst's husband, Edward, worked for the Army and is among the missing.
Mostly I'm just here in case he comes out and that I can be somewhere in the vicinity where I can get to him.
Tonight, the U.S. military is on the move. Warplanes continue to patrol the skies over 41 major U.S. cities. as the aircraft carrier George Washington arrives off the coast of New York to provide security and medical assistance. And in a videotaped message to the troops, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld pledges swift and sure retaliation.
We face powerful and terrible enemies, enemies we intend to vanquish, so that moments of horror like yesterday will be stopped.
Osama bin Laden remains the prime suspect. Pentagon officials tell NBC News if there's enough evidence to link him to the attacks, the Bush administration is prepared to move quickly and aggressively. The sources suggest these would not be the kind of pinprick missile strikes that have failed to get bin Laden in the past, but an all-out military campaign designed to capture or eliminate the Saudi-born terrorist. In addition, the military campaign could be aimed at the Afghanistan's ruling party, the Taliban, for harboring bin Laden. Such an effort would require a military commitment the Clinton White House would not make, and a willingness to accept a large number of American military casualties. After yesterday's devastating terrorist attacks, former General Norman Schwarzkopf says it's a sacrifice the American people are willing to make.
I think the American public is angry now, and I think they're going to get more angry rather than less angry. I think they're going to expect action to be taken.
That kind of support evident tonight as rescue workers unfurl a huge American flag on the roof of the Pentagon. Secretary Rumsfeld also warned his troops today against leaking any military secrets. One more sign the Pentagon is dead set on launching military strikes. Tom?
Jim Miklaszewski at the White House. Thanks very much tonight. As we have mentioned, it could be days, even weeks, before there's a credible guess at how many people died in the World Trade Center attack. It could rival some of the deadliest days for Americans in all of history, all of which were in wartime. Gettysburg.
Coordinates of their targets, and GPS, or global positioning satellite, would then provide a direct course for that aircraft to fly through. Now, a lot of these, again, these airliners and even smaller aircraft use these as their navigation systems.
A post office box in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, at Saudi Airlines. And 4 of those are commercial pilots, Judy.
All right, Mike Boettcher, I know this information is coming in bits and pieces, and we want to try to report it as it comes in. Mike Boettcher, thanks very much. Well, we've been telling you, our colleagues in New York, Aaron Brown and others have been telling us about those rescue efforts in New York, people literally risking their lives now in order to see if there's anyone left alive in the rubble of the World Trade Center. Right now, CNN's national correspondent Gary Tuchman is on the telephone to tell us what is going on with that building very much at risk. Gary?
Well, Judy, there is a deep feeling of unease in the lower portion of Manhattan tonight. The building is called One Liberty Plaza. It's a very tall, grayish-black building that is just to the east of where the 2 World Trade Center towers were. About 2 hours ago, I was brought to ground zero to see the 1,000 to 1,500 workers who are on the scene working at the wreckage. I was told when I was there they were deeply concerned about that One Liberty Plaza building and another building to the south that has a huge hole in it. These are very brave people. They are walking on top of wreckage, and in some cases is 75 feet tall, lifting up heavy metal with the knowledge that 2 buildings nearby are vulnerable. Well, about 30 minutes after I was there, they started noticing that that One Liberty Plaza building started twisting, and then windows started popping out of the building. Immediately, an evacuation was ordered, and now all 1,000 to 1,500 people have evacuated the area. There is no one at the scene right now participating in the rescue and recovery. In addition, members of the news media who were about 4 or 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center site were told to immediately start moving back a couple of blocks to get farther away from the building. The fear is, and we should make this very clear, there is no evidence this building is coming down. But there is a concern that it could happen. And if the building did come down, and that's still a long shot in my estimation based on talking to people, it could potentially knock down other buildings nearby, creating a very huge problem. And that's why the area has been evacuated. I should tell you, Judy, being at the site, one thing that I must stress, this is a much worse disaster in terms of damage than I ever imagined, even being 4 blocks away. When I got there, we are talking about damage to maybe 100 to 150 businesses that aren't part of the World Trade Center complex, some very substantial. There is debris and damage in a 10-square block area. area in each direction from the World Trade Center complex. A morgue has been set up across from the World Trade Center in a damaged Brooks Brothers store. That's where people who have perished have been brought. And there is a center, a triage center, set up in the One Liberty Plaza building. So there might be a concern when you evacuated that building, what happens to the people in the triage center? Well, sadly, there's no one in the triage center because they haven't found any survivors in the past several hours. Judy?
All right, Gary, I have one more question I want to ask you, and as I do, I believe we're going to be able to show our viewers some very unusual pictures from the International Space Station. These are pictures of New York City from space. So that now I'm seeing this for the first time, just as you are. The smoke you're able to see is clearly that coming from that area of Lower Manhattan that Gary has been reporting on. Gary, I don't think you're in a position to see this, but it certainly does give us the bird's eye view of the city and just one more idea of the incredible devastation wrought by yesterday's acts of terrorism. Gary, one last question while I'm talking to you. How close now are the emergency personnel to the area that of the devastation, given the risk of this One Liberty Plaza building? Are people still in the immediate adjacent area?
I can tell you, Judy, that many of the rescue and recovery workers are standing with me right now, and we're about 4 or 5 blocks away. People aren't getting very close at this point because of the risk. I also wanted to mention your talk.
Number two had a chance to clear out. A lot of people probably cleared.
And people are walking down the streets wearing masks, wearing bandanas over their face and their nose because too much time spent without the mask or the bandana leaves you with a sore throat because of all the fumes that have been prevalent here for the last day and a half.
All right, Gary Tuchman.
The Emergency Management Agency explained today why it was taking so long to recover the bodies and how that compared with the bombing in Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City, for that small structure, went 15 days. So you can imagine we're going to be in a long, sustained operation. Now, the difference is New York City has a tremendous capability, 14,000 firefighters and paramedics. So that's also in the equation, but I think that we're looking at least a 30 to 60-day operation.
With the exception of relief workers, Manhattan's Lower West Side was shut down today. All of the financial markets were closed for a second straight day as well. The mayor encouraged the rest of the city to try to return to some semblance of a normal day. The task of rebuilding New York's savage skyline and its crippled financial district, the world's economic nerve center, was a major concern to the mayor.
There's no question we're going to rebuild. I can't say that we know the exact nature yet of how we're going to do that. The skyline will be whole again. Exactly, what will be there, I think we have to leave to giving some people some time to consider it and to think about it. And also, the reality is that the people in New York City are going to be whole again. We're going to rebuild. We're not only going to rebuild, we're going to come out of this stronger than we were before. And in addition to having wonderful people in New York, as the governor indicated, we also have the strongest business community of any place in the world. We're going to call upon them, and we're going to need their help. But we're going to come out of this emotionally stronger, politically stronger, much closer together as a city, and we're going to come out of this economically stronger too.
Late today, the few stories of the South Tower of the World Trade Center that remained began to collapse. Rescue workers were told to leave quickly, and another nearby building, One Liberty Plaza, was also threatening to come down.
Now, a report from Ray Suarez on the ground in New York City.
While crews struggled to bring order out of the chaos at the scene of the attack, in other parts of New York, the attention turned to treating the hurt, searching for the missing, and processing the dead. A day and a half after the terrorists struck, there was still relatively little known about the human cost of the crime.
You want to come and speak to somebody? I did already. Okay.
Outside the New School University in New York's Greenwich Village, a line stretched for a block. St. Vincent's Hospital, one of the main trauma centers in Lower Manhattan, set up an information clearinghouse, a unified database with all the news of the wounded admitted to area hospitals. John Castro is helping his son look for his fiancée.
Her parents had contact with her right after the plane hit the first tower, but we haven't heard anything since the second
must get harder with every hour that passes.
Well, it is. It's quite hard. I mean, as time goes by, you know, things are more bleak. But, he doesn't want to give up hope, and neither do I.
The family of Moises Rivas, a chef at Windows on the World, the famed restaurant at the top of the World Trade Towers, also waited for word and worked the phones.
We don't find him in the list at all. And I'm just waiting to see if he appears. That's it. And
Do you know that he went to work yesterday morning?
yes, he did. He called me from there 9 o'clock exactly, and he told me that he left me and that was it. And he hung up the phone on me because it was the explosion right there, the first explosion.
So he already knew something was up.
Yeah. He just said, I'm okay, don't worry, I love you. No matter what, I love you. And he just hung up.
Yeah.
And I wish he appeared because we got 2 little kids.
My son was Mark Zeppelin. He worked on the 104th floor.
Desperately holding on to scraps of hope and fighting to maintain composure, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives tell anyone who listen about who they're looking for.
If anybody sees him or knows anything, his name is Andrew Stern. And
Do you know that he even made it to work yesterday?
Yes.
You do know that?
He did go to work yesterday. He was in very early, about 7:30. So he was definitely there. So if anybody knows anything, please, his wife and his mother and the rest of us are all waiting to hear. Andrew Stern from Cantor Fitzgerald.
My brother was on that floor. I have a brother also that's missing.
Okay.
He's Robert Slewax's wife, Susan. They're from Long Island. Their number there is 516-783-8244. We were here yesterday and we thought that they were setting up a facility or a service for people from Cantor, and as I understand it now, I don't know if they're there or not, and we'd like the Cantor people to please come and give us some information. This is my brother, he's 42. He was on the 103rd or 4th floor. His wife, he called his wife when he heard a bang, and told her there was smoke all over and the phone went dead, and that's the last we heard, and that was yesterday.
This is my brother, Tom Knox. He was in Tower 1 on the 105th floor. If anybody knows anything about him, please contact us.
The flow of the wounded into trauma centers, a torrent yesterday, slowed to a trickle today. This was a chance for the emergency workers at St. Vincent's to catch their breaths, grab a bottle of water or a piece of pizza, take blood donations, and process volunteers. A dozen refrigerator trucks rolled in a convoy to the New York City Medical Examiner's office this afternoon. As one processing center for the dead reaches capacity, the work spreads to centers throughout the metropolitan area. What you see behind me is just the front edge of a line that stretches more than 2.5 blocks to the FDR Drive on the east side of Manhattan. These people are waiting to submit personal information questionnaires. These are 6-, 7-page dossiers that contain information about blood type, identifying scars, dental work, and if you remember, the last outfit of clothes a missing person might have been wearing when they headed for work yesterday morning. One of the most interesting parts of this shared experience for these New Yorkers is how, even though on the front of the line they've been waiting for more than 3 hours to submit this work and give a personal interview, there is no panic. There's very little in the way of acting out or the tears. It's deadly calm back on that street. People have very serious work to do. All day, you knew something was wrong in New York, not by what was there, but by what was missing. Wednesday, midday, no traffic on 6th Avenue, and above 6th Avenue, no shadow from the World Trade Towers.
In Washington, government officials stepped up the rhetoric as the Pentagon recovery efforts continued. Kwame Holman reports.
The day after dawned in Washington with smoke still rising from the Pentagon. Small fires in roof sections continued to burn. Defense Department employees had been told to return to work, but officials briefly reconsidered that and ordered the massive building cleared.
We have had the fuel from the jet catch fire again, and we're now in there with some additional hand lines and some phone lines with aircraft firefighters inside of the insides of the Pentagon trying to suppress it, this time with firefighting foam.
Just after noon, officials rescinded the evacuation order despite the stubborn flames. Pentagon officials said no one could have survived the catastrophic impact of the jetliner and the fire that followed. FBI agents combed the grounds for evidence. Today's return to work for official Washington included President Bush, who received his daily national security briefing, then met with the cabinet.
The deliberate and deadly attacks which were carried out yesterday against our country were more than acts of terror. They were acts of war. This will require our country to unite in steadfast determination and resolve. Freedom and democracy are under attack. The American people need to know we're facing a different enemy than we have ever faced. This enemy hides in shadows and has no regard for human life. This is an enemy who preys on innocent and unsuspecting people, then runs for cover. But it won't be able to run for cover forever. This is an enemy that tries to hide, but it won't be able to hide forever. This is an enemy that thinks its harbors are safe, but they won't be safe forever.
Beside the Capitol's dome, the flag flew at half-staff.
Senate Joint Resolution 22, expressing the sense of the Senate and the House of Representatives regarding the terrorist attacks launched against the United States on September 11, 2001.
At 10 a.m., the House and Senate convened simultaneously. The only business, a 3-page joint resolution condemning yesterday's attacks and declaring today a national day of unity and mourning.
And Mr. President, it's so important that we show that even these terrible acts cannot stop America from going forward. We must get on with our important work.
Today we go back to work in Washington, New York, and all around the country, and we're determined to show the world that America will not be defeated by anyone.
A short time later, Congress's leaders met privately with the president. They emerged, promising Mr. Bush will get whatever he needs to respond to yesterday's events.
We're in complete agreement that we will work together, that we want to share information, that we will be ready to move on whatever the president suggests, and we will go through the debate and the actions of Congress in a bipartisan way to make that happen.
We will work with the administration to allocate the resources and to dedicate whatever strategy may be required to fulfill our obligations. It is our strong desire to do this not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans. And we will continue to demonstrate that desire as we consider whatever other actions may be required in days ahead.
Congress could approve billions in emergency funds to aid New York City and install new security measures as early as the end of the week. It was late this afternoon that Attorney General John Ashcroft and FBI Director Robert Mueller revealed a wider terrorist threat yesterday and substantial progress in the investigation.
The 4 planes were hijacked by between 3 and 6 individuals per plane, using knives and box cutters, and in some cases making bomb threats. Our government has credible evidence that the White House and Air Force One were targets. A number of the suspected hijackers were trained as pilots in the United States.
We have, in the last 24 hours, taken the manifests and used those as an evidentiary base, and have talked to many of the families of the victims, and have successfully, I believe, identified many of the hijackers on each of the 4 flights that went down. We also have identified through a number of leads, principally at the cities of origin, a number of individuals whom we believe may have had something to do with the hijackings, and we are pursuing those leads aggressively.
At his daily briefing, White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer was quizzed about why Air Force One flew from Florida to Louisiana and Nebraska yesterday before finally returning to Andrews Air Force Base near Washington.
Because the information that we had was real incredible about Air Force One, and the manner in which Air Force One operated maintained the security of Air Force One at all times, and that also was one of the reasons why Air Force One did not come back to Andrews, where some people may have thought it would.
A short time ago, the president made the short trip from the White House to the Pentagon, where he praised rescue workers.
More on the investigation now, and to Margaret Warner.
And joining us is Evan Thomas, Assistant Managing Editor of Newsweek magazine. Evan, flesh out a little more for us what Ashcroft and Mueller just said. First of all, about what they've learned about what happened yesterday.
Well, the FBI believes that there was an act of heroism on the plane that didn't get to Washington, the plane that crashed near Pittsburgh. I actually spoke last night, as the FBI has, I think, several times, to a woman named Liz Glick, whose husband, Jeremy, was on that plane. And he called on a cell phone and told her the plane had been hijacked. And he said that he was talking to some other male passengers, 4 or 5 other passengers, about taking a last-ditch attempt to jump the hijackers, as he put it. They could hear over the phone then screams, silence, screams again, silence, and then nothing. And the FBI believes there was some kind of a wrestling match and that plane crashed in a field instead of getting to Washington and hitting the White House or the Capitol or some real target.
And then how do investigators know, and maybe they're not saying, but that Air Force One and the White House were targets?
Well, I don't know how they know about Air Force One. I mean, the White House was definitely, the plane that crashed into the Pentagon was actually headed right for the White House.
So just by looking at the flight.
Looking at the flight plan turned into the Pentagon. I'm not sure about the other one, why they think the Air Force One was a target.
Now, then we heard Ashcroft or Mueller say that they have identified from the flight manifest, they think a great many of the hijackers. Who are they?
Well, the FBI has a lot of these guys in their filing cabinets. I mean, some of these names that have turned up in connection with this investigation are familiar names. This, of course, raises the question of, was there an intelligence failure? If they knew who these people were, why couldn't they catch them? I think the answer to that is it's easier said than done. I mean, they were tapping the phones of the people who bombed the embassies in Africa for about a year, and they still missed that. So there'll be lots of investigations and recriminations, but the point is that I think they're going to crack this cell. They're going to find out who did this.
But for instance, do they know the nationality of these people?
Yeah, they're foreigners. They're Middle Easterners who were, it's been described to us at Newsweek, who were in this country from between a week and a year. That's the time frame. Came from many different countries. All of this suggests a very careful, deliberate, orchestrated act.
Now, another focus, as they said today, is people who are still around, not hijackers who helped them. And there was a whole flurry today about arrests or detentions. Different words were used in both Boston and in Florida. What can you tell us about that?
Well, they're just trying to hold these people until they find out. I mean, when they talk about holding somebody as a material witness, they may become suspects. They just don't have enough evidence yet. Or they may truly be witnesses. They may be family members. They want to hold on to these people, pull the string back, as it were. But they are well on their way to finding out who did this.
What has been the most helpful pieces of evidence, for instance, in identifying some of these alleged accomplices or material witnesses?
Well, you know about this rental car they found in Boston that had Arab materials.
Linked to one of the hijackers.
Linked to one of the hijackers. They're looking at these flight schools, these pilot training schools in Florida. One of the pilots who trained at these schools is missing, and they think that he was one of the pilots who flew one of those Boeing airliners into the ground.
And then, of course, all the cell phone calls from passengers who were on the plane.
There are descriptions of the hijackers from those cell phones, although I'm not sure that's as important as things like just the ticket, who bought the ticket, and tracing canceled checks, credit cards, that kind of thing.
And then how far have they gotten in establishing who their outside sponsors might have been? Of course, there's been all this talk about Osama bin Laden.
I mean, you still hear from investigators this figure, 90% sure it was bin Laden, only bin Laden could have pulled this off. I mean, a combination of circumstantial evidence and intercepts of calls to bin Laden saying that we hit the target, which sounds pretty convincing. That maybe those are false claims, or maybe there's some story we don't know, but they think they have electronic intercepts that tie bin Laden directly.
And finally, how far along are they in collecting physical evidence actually at the crash scenes? For instance, the black boxes. We haven't heard about recovering those.
I think that's all. I mean, I know they're worried that they're never going to get them out of the World Trade Center and all of that rubble. I think they're more optimistic that they're going to find them at the Pentagon and in that field outside of Pittsburgh.
And I gather they actually can't even go into the World Trade Center yet to collect evidence.
Right. I mean, they obviously have a ways to go here. It's not yet a real crime scene in the sense of forensic specialists poring over the rubble. They're still trying to rescue people.
All right, Evan, thanks very much.
Now more on the state of recovery at the Pentagon, and to Gwen Eichel.
For that assessment, we're joined by George Wilson, military columnist for the National Journal and former Pentagon reporter for the Washington Post. George, have you been over to the Pentagon in the last day and seen what it's like there?
Yes, I was there this morning, and it was still smoking. And the scene was very somber, very sad. There was a lone American flag flying on the roof where the west side of the building had been devastated by that airliner. The whole face was charred, and a big gap was in the building. And there were cranes there ready to put engineers on the roof so they could assess where the damage occurred and what the structural problems were. And there were tents outside in the parking lot to attend to the stricken and also give some meals to the construction workers.
You mentioned that it's still smoking. Our offices are not so very far from the Pentagon, and we can step outside and still smell the smoke. Why are the fires still burning if that's what's happening?
Well, as of late this morning, it was smoking, and one of the policemen who said you can't go in there now because the fires have just restarted. It's kind of a honeycomb structure, and it has various cells all along these corridors, so I suspect that there's little scattered fires that you just can't attack as one solid mass. But I have to add that late this afternoon when I went by, there was no more smoke coming out, and the fire was indeed finally out.
So when you talk about the honeycomb structure, when we think about the Pentagon, we know it's five-sided, but unless you fly over it, like a lot of people do landing in Washington, there are 5 hallways, corridors that go around in kind of a...
Right, there's concentric corridors, just figure like a set of donuts, each one smaller than the one behind it. And so a fireman would have to weave his way through these corridors into these various separated hallways. And it would be a slow-moving process. And besides that, a good many of the doors in the Pentagon have combination locks on them. So a fireman couldn't just bang open the door and go in there with a foam or hose. He'd have to either knock down the door or know the combination. And I suspect there was a lot of fire axes at work.
So where did this plane actually impact?
It impacted in the west face of the Pentagon, which is where the helicopters that take the generals and executives of the Pentagon in and out. And it hit at the lower levels so that all 5 stories were smashed. And of course, the big damage was done by the fuel. It was, in effect, a very effective bomb. And it hit smack into the face, and it took some pretty good flying to be that precise.
Who works in that area of the Pentagon?
It's mostly Army people. That's an Army side of the Pentagon, but the good news is that because much of that face of the building was under renovation, some of it had already been renovated, and it had glass which was plasticized so that it didn't shatter and scatter and hurt people. And also because there was renovations ongoing, several of the offices were unoccupied. So the casualties were less than they would have been if they'd hit, say, another face of the building.
Was there any sign of the plane that hit the building left in the wreckage that you could see?
I could not see it, which amazed me, because I thought that big a plane I could spot some pieces of the wreckage, but I suspect it's buried in the rubble, or from that distance that they let you go to, which is on the perimeter, maybe it wasn't visible, but It was surprising that there was a hole there as opposed to a splattering of parts on the concrete face of the building.
And we can only assume that the Pentagon still remains ground zero for whatever retaliatory response the U.S. is planning. You've been doing some reporting on that. What have you heard?
Well, that it's not going to be just a single strike, that this is going to be a long war, and they're using the term war, if you notice, more and more, and it's kind of the who, what, when, and where, and as soon as that is determined, there will be strikes, and eventually, given the President's words and the military planners' words, if you're harboring a terrorist, a known terrorist, and you will not give him up to us, there is certainly a lot of sentiment for inflicting some real hurt on that country.
The folks you've talked to who work at the Pentagon, have they gotten over the shock of this?
No. It's a very, people go back and forth to work, but it's a very sober kind of movement. It's almost like they're a little bit shell-shocked, and understandably so. With one Air Force officer told me this morning that he was on the entire other side of the building, but the impact was such that it shook the whole building, and he couldn't believe a structure that solid and that built like a fortress could be shaken by such an attack.
Thank you, George Wilson.
You're welcome.
Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, airport security and how to respond. The airport security issues. Late this afternoon, Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta announced that passengers stranded on flights yesterday would be allowed to continue to their destinations. He also outlined some new security guidelines.
I have ordered a variety of security measures to be instituted at our nation's airports upon reopening to improve the security of our aviation system. A thorough search and security check of all airports and airplanes will take place before passengers are allowed to enter and reboard aircraft. We will discontinue curbside check-in at the airport, and passengers will be required to go to the ticket counters to check in. We will also discontinue off-airport check-in. We can no longer allow passengers to check in for their flights at hotels or other venues. Passengers must check in at the airports. We must reserve boarding areas for passengers only. Only ticketed passengers will be allowed to proceed past airport screeners to catch their flights. And all vehicles near airport terminals will be monitored more closely.
Of statements that have come out today with the European leaders and the European public standing side by side and shoulder to shoulder with the United States. These markets, the European markets, all the main bourses were open for trade today. It was jumpy trade. It was a little bit disoriented, the trading today, but we didn't see any panic selling, and that's really the key point. I'll show you how the markets closed on the session. We did have some buying that sustained through the open and through much of the day. Some of it safe haven plays, a move into the drug sector and in the food sector, and some buying in the telecommunications sector.
Lanti and Friscia. Recently, ABC circulated internal documents stating an injured person represented by an attorney received on average 3 times as much money as the personal injury victim with
on the wooded island. He said he was overwhelmed by the devastation. He said the scene made him sad and angry. NATO says that if it's confirmed the attack originated outside America, it will be deemed an attack on the entire alliance. The FBI says it knows the identities of most of the hijackers responsible for the attacks. Some were trained in the United States as pilots. The mayor of New York says he fears thousands of bodies are still buried beneath the ruins of Manhattan. The remaining 7 floors of the World Trade Center have partially collapsed. more than 30 hours after the double suicide attack. Several countries around the world have declared Friday a day of mourning. This is BBC World News. President Bush said the United States now faced a type of enemy it had never faced before. The biggest question right now is what action America will take to avenge the deaths of so many innocent people. Justin Webb reports.
The Pentagon at dawn this morning, the heart of America's military might, deeply wounded, deeply traumatized. But the military hardware controlled from here is still in place. The ships, the planes, the soldiers, all at a high state of readiness. Their commanders on morning television talking openly of war.
American people have a clear understanding that this is a war. It's the way they see it. You can't see it any other way, whether legally that is correct or not.
You do too?
And yes, I do. And we've got to respond as if it is a war. And we've got to respond in the sense that it isn't going to be solved with a single counterattack against one individual. It's going to be a long-term conflict.
But one individual is looking very likely to be the first target for an American strike. Osama bin Laden is known to fund and train a network of anti-American terror groups from his base in Afghanistan. To attack him, America has three difficult options. The use of cruise missiles has been tried before and failed. Airstrikes might work, but there'd be a risk of hitting civilians. Or ground forces could be sent in with a big risk of more American casualties. There is a fourth option. America's friends in the Middle East will be pointing to the extraordinary scenes of some Muslims celebrating yesterday's horror and asking America to ask itself why it is so hated.
They should look at political solutions. Why the American administration is hated in the Middle East and all over the Muslim world. Definitely there is something wrong in the American foreign policies. They have to look at this, and they have to listen to their friends in Europe and in the Middle East.
Tonight, though, America's Secretary of State was sticking to his message that a war had begun.
Our spirits will not be broken. The resilience of this society will not be broken. We will find out who is responsible for this, and they will pay for it.
Off the coast of New York City, the aircraft carrier George Washington, a potent symbol of America's ability, should it choose, to hit back. Justin Webb, BBC News.
Earlier, I spoke to Robert McNamara, who served as the American Secretary of State under John F. Kennedy, a position he held from 1961 to 68. I asked him how he thought the Bush administration should respond to these attacks.
By two quite separate actions. The first, of course, is to identify the terrorists and punish them. I think the Bush administration is well on the way to doing that. I hope it will not act in isolation when it does. I hope it will act in association with allies. I want to say more about this tendency of the U.S. to act unilaterally in a few moments. But that's just the first step. Identify and punish the terrorists. But much more fundamental in preventing future terrorist acts is to determine why these terrorists acted as they did, and then to address the fundamental causes. I don't know, since I don't know who the terrorists were, I don't know why they acted as they did, but thinking about who the terrorists might have been and why they might have acted as they did, I think there are two possible causes for the terrorist acts. One is a serious conflict between Muslim fundamentalists and others in the world. And the other is a reflection of and an effect of the escalation, and what I think can be a continuing escalation of the conflict between Arab and Israel, between Arabs and Israel, Palestine and Israel.
Could I just interrupt? I mean, you're advocating a sort of measured, a thoughtful response after the facts are clear. But well, isn't time short? I mean, if you wait to pin all this down, clearly there could be more attacks in the meantime.
No. There's time to identify. My God, we don't want to respond with military force until we have some confidence we're responding against the attackers, against the terrorists. No, I don't think that's going to take a lot of time. We already, in this country, in the United States, we've already taken custody today, I think in both Massachusetts and Florida, of some suspects. And I think we'll act reasonably promptly. Whether it takes a day or a week is not important. What is important is that we don't punish innocent people. I don't think we should. I don't think we will. If we did, I don't think we'll maintain the support of our allies.
Now, you
which
talked
we
about
must
it
have.
being important not for America to act unilaterally. As you may have heard, within the last half hour, NATO have invoked Article 5 for the first time in its history, saying, in effect, that an attack against one member is an attack against all of them. Do you think it's important now that there should be a united military response?
It is absolutely essential, or at a minimum, in the short term, since the U.S. is probably more ready for a military response than others in NATO, it's absolutely essential that if the U.S. responds militarily, it respond, in a sense, as an agent of NATO. I don't think it's as important that there be U.S. and non-U.S. forces as it is that it be an action endorsed by NATO. And
Why
if
is
the
that
US
important from the American point of view?
Because we must understand we can't run the world by ourselves. And if we continue to try to do so, as we have in not just this administration, but past administrations, we're going to lose the support of our allies, and ultimately, we cannot prevail as unilateralists.
Robert McNamara. Arab leaders have almost unanimously condemned Tuesday's terrorist attacks on America, but their official media have also said that the United States' support for Israel could be to blame, driving people in the Middle East towards extremism. On the streets of Cairo, some Egyptians have openly welcomed the attacks, and there have been celebrations in Palestinian refugee camps. Our Middle East correspondent Frank Gardner reports now from Cairo.
In the coffee shops of Cairo, they're still digesting the news. America, the country many Arabs see as their enemy, has been hit hard. But Egyptians are divided over whether they support the attacks. What happened in the States is right, says this man. God willing, it will also happen in Britain and in all the countries that help Israel. We are happy. It's the least they deserve. It's wrong, says this man. Today it's in the US, tomorrow it'll be in Europe or in Egypt. No religion and no ethics can accept this. Egypt's government, like nearly all those in the region, has unequivocally condemned the attacks. President Hosni Mubarak said America was a friendly state and that he condemned terrorism. But the official Arab press is also blaming Israel. It suggests America had it coming for seemingly supporting Israel against the Palestinians. Egypt had already warned of a possible terrorist outrage.
There was a lot of warning from Egypt all the time regarding international terrorism, and there was always a call by President Mubarak and other Egyptian officials that we need a world-coordinated effort to fight terrorism. And the United States always shied away from multilateral type of cooperation in this field.
Some Palestinians are openly delighted over the attacks. Images like these have embarrassed moderate Arabs. They know that they risk hardening world opinion against the Palestinians, and perhaps even against Arabs in general. For those who hate America, and there are many here in the Arab world, the success of these attacks is beyond their wildest dreams. But in the end, ordinary Arabs could well be the losers. The fact that some Arabs actually welcome death and destruction on such a massive scale is unlikely to win world sympathy for their cause. Frank Gardner, BBC News, Cairo.
The BBC's World Affairs editor, John Simpson, has just been to Afghanistan. He's now in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad. And he says the information reaching Pakistan is very contradictory.
Somebody from, apparently a messenger from Osama bin Laden came into the office of a newspaper here in Islamabad, which contained something which said, message which said that he hadn't actually been responsible for the atrocities in the United States. Well, there's even been some question about whether he wrote that particular piece of paper. As for the Taliban, they've been showing more signs of nervousness, perhaps, at the thought that where their guest might lead them, including a suggestion never properly underscored or reinforced later that they might be prepared to hand him over if necessary, and if the necessary evidence were produced by the Americans that he had indeed been responsible for the planning of the atrocities. Now, in fact, they offered something not very dissimilar 3 years ago, and so I don't think we necessarily need to assume that that's a genuine offer.
Where does Pakistan fit in all this? I think it's one of only 3 countries that recognize the Taliban. We heard Colin Powell saying a few hours ago that there have been low-level talks between the Pakistanis and the Americans, presumably the Americans asking for cooperation from the Pakistanis. Could they exert pressure on the Taliban? Is their relationship such that they could exert pressure on the Taliban to expel Osama bin Laden?
Pakistan could, if it chose to, exert a great deal of pressure on the Taliban, because really, essentially, it's Pakistan that keeps Taliban-ruled Afghanistan going with supplies of fuel, with supplies of all sorts of things which go across the border, food, water, even at this time of very serious drought in Afghanistan. So yes, in principle, they could. In fact, I think there are signs that Pakistan is getting extremely nervous about being singled out as it were, a supporter in any sense of the Taliban, and I think we may see some movement here in the next few days.
What word from the Pakistani authorities about all this, and anything on the streets?
Not so far, no. I mean, people have been watching. The word from the Pakistani authorities is a very stern condemnation of what took place in New York and Washington. There's no moral equivocation on the part of the Pakistani authorities on that issue at all. And on the street, really just people nervous about it. I mean, I'm sure that there must, in some parts of the country, be people who are quite pleased with what happened, as there have been in other parts of the world. But for the most part, I think the great majority of people are absolutely horrified by it.
John Simpson in Islamabad. Now, President Bush, within the last couple of hours, has been to visit the rescue operation at the Pentagon. Let's go to Washington now, and our correspondent, Rob Watson. Rob, it must have been a very poignant visit for the president, going to see the Pentagon. I mean, it took the attack that could have been destined for him.
Skyscrapers to fall down after being hit by aircraft hijacked by terrorists. Levin's office was on the 68th floor. He has served as superintendent of the state banking and insurance departments under Pataki, and that indeed is his picture, and they are indeed anxiously awaiting word on his condition. Governor Pataki, on another note, will address a joint session of the state legislature tomorrow regarding the destruction of the World Trade Center towers by terrorist attacks. Focus of the speech is expected to be the resolve New Yorkers showed in going forward following the disaster. He's also expected to outline, that is, some of the steps he and his legislature can take to immediately help the rescue and rebuilding effort. We saw him earlier today at a joint press conference with Senators Schumer and Clinton and Mayor Giuliani in a joint federal, state, and local show of support for federal funds and any other type of assistance that can happen on each one of those levels. Pataki said it will send the message that, quote, "We're not going to be stopped." The speech will be the first in memory by a governor to a joint legislative session in New York, other than his annual State of the State address. Now, after the speech, the legislature will approve a joint resolution condemning the attack, honoring the victims and rescue workers. Of course, where travel and many of the offices are still affected by all this. Gary, you've got that list?
We have a list of some of the closings and transportation closings and service adjustments that will be in effect tomorrow. Normal service will operate on the Long Island Railroad, as will the Metro North Railroad. Staten Island bridges will reopen. The George Washington Bridge on the upper deck, both directions, will be open. The lower deck will be closed. Lincoln Tunnel will reopen to traffic both ways. Tolls will not be charged at both of those crossings. The Holland Tunnel, however, which empties out into Lower Manhattan, will be closed. Only emergency vehicles will have access to that, and both the Port Authority and the City of New York are saying that decision on whether or not to let in regular traffic will be made on a day-by-day basis. Path operations have resumed from Hoboken and Newark to 33rd Street. The Port Authority is talking with the Coast Guard and police about reopening the ferry terminals. New Jersey Transit is offering regular rail service to and from Penn Station in New York and Hoboken. And New Jersey Transit bus service is available, well, it's only available in New Jersey, so it doesn't apply to anybody listening here, I don't think. Most subway service has resumed a regular schedule with the exception of the C. And New York City public schools will open tomorrow, but 2 hours later, with the exception of all schools below 14th Street, they will not be open at all.
There's also news on the national front in terms of the investigation. Attorney General John Ashcroft says now there are numerous credible leads into the attacks. He said authorities are conducting interviews, reviewing airline manifests, payphone records to try to identify the people who hijacked the 4 planes, 3 of which crashed into American landmarks. He says each hijacked plane was taken over by between 3 and 6 hijackers armed with knives and box cutters. Officials say at least one set of hijackers is believed to have crossed from Canada, had ties to fugitive terrorist Osama bin Laden. FBI Director Robert Mueller says individuals have been detained and questioned, but there have been no arrests at this point. Mueller says agents have followed leads that indicate the hijackers or their associates have been in Florida, Boston, and Providence, Rhode Island. Agents are attempting to retrace their steps. Now, the FBI Director says investigators have 2 goals. First, to identify the hijackers and any accomplices both inside and outside the United States. The Attorney General says it's perhaps the most massive and intensive investigation ever conducted in America.
Well, with all the searching and all the questioning so far, the FBI says that nobody has been arrested in connection with these attacks. I'm sure that is a situation investigators hope to rectify or certainly update in the not-too-distant future. Investigations not only going on here in the United States, but also in Europe, believed to be the source of some of the people who took those planes and caused the tragedy.
Well, indecent support for Bush came from Europe today as NATO sent a strong message to the perpetrators of the terror attacks in the United States. At a meeting in Brussels, ambassadors adopted a declaration. It stated that a terrorist attack against the U.S. should be considered an attack on all members of NATO. This is something that President Bush was apparently hoping for in his speeches when he talked about getting world support for any future action. Secretary General Lord Robertson said the move means the U.S. has the support for any military action from its NATO allies if it's determined that the attacks were committed by foreigners outside the United States. At the news conference I talked about earlier with the appearance of Hillary Rodham Clinton and Senator Schumer and Governor Pataki and Mayor Giuliani, Hillary Clinton said outright that this is just a downright act of war, and that the polls and the questions that she's asked of Americans mean that they support that notion, meaning that if it came down to it, Americans would certainly look at that in somewhat of a favorable light, as opposed to seeing New York as someplace not worth defending.
Right now in the U.S. Capitol, there is a prayer vigil being held. Tomorrow, lawmakers will consider a measure to actually declare war. Of course, with not being able to 100% pin down where this is from, of course, you have to have someone to declare war against. Hopefully that lawmakers by then are hoping that both the FBI and whatever investigative bodies are working on this case will have more conclusive evidence by then.
Okay. While we're waiting for the mayor's press conference, let's check back in with John Schumo, who's very near ground zero. John?
Yeah, Lewis, just in the past 60 seconds, no more than that, maybe a minute more tops, we heard a loud noise for the first time down here. Once again, we are on West Street, and as we take a look, I'm going to step out of our shot here as we look through one of several angles we can provide for you. A new fresh plume of smoke, which is visible now even in the night sky, has now made its way up. This is a developing story. We're not quite sure what it was. Obviously, we are a good distance away. We are a safe distance away, but make no mistake about it, something just fell. What it is, whether it was planned, whether it is construction crews, some heavy machinery, just taking down a wall, I don't know, and at this point it is not my place to speculate, but I can report to you with absolute confidence that something just came down by the Trade Center, something significant enough that we heard it here. And keep in mind also, we have not heard when 5 World Trade came down. I was reporting to you that earlier. This we heard, and we saw the smoke coming out of the side. I'm trying to get my bearings here as I look on a map. It is certainly, obviously, probably about 5 blocks is my guess, south of the Chambers Street overpass, the walkway here. If we take our ground shot, the view from down on our ground level right now, if we can provide that for you, you'll be able to see the Chambers Street Bridge. And if we're on this shot right now, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about. These new white plumes of smoke, which are right now emanating from a structure several blocks south of the Chambers Street overpass.
Thank you so much. You know, one of the things that has really been astounding to me is that after what happened yesterday, I think these monsters wanted us to become timid and afraid. But the antithesis has happened. Instead, across the United States, patriotism is swelling. And so many young people and even veterans are calling to say, how can we help? You know, younger people are saying, I want to sign up to join the military. Older veterans are saying, what can I do to help? So, you know what? We're not afraid of you.
Well, Mayor Giuliani, of course, Governor Pataki, and President Bush have all said the same thing. This is when we pull together that this is a test, and we will win the test. We will beat this test. Also, what you're saying, we have been seeing it all day long from some of the comments of people who are saying, I can't believe this is happening on our soil. What do they think they're doing? These were innocent people. There is anger, of course, but at the same time, it's being tempered with what you call the patriotism, the sense that this is our country, that we do not deserve this, and that we will rise above it.
And that we're going to fight back.
I think we're hearing that as well.
Yes.
We just have to be very careful how that's handled,
Of course. Mika Halpern is joining us again. He's a Middle East expert. Good to see you again. He's also a columnist for AOL. And as I said yesterday when you were with us, Mika lives in Jerusalem. He was visiting relatives here, and of course now...
The hole where the buildings used to be. And, you know, it's like, and I forgot to tell y'all, but like after the first building crashed, it was like, I would imagine like Mount St. Helens or Hiroshima. It was all ash. There was like 3 inches of ash in front of our building.
We opened the door, went into the hallway, and went down the stairs. When we finally got to the ground floor, we met other people who I assume were in the same predicament as we were. And eventually we were taken by, and I have to stop here, everyone. Take it to me. Was so nice. Both in New York and in Bayonne, where we are now. It's terrible. Terrible.
Take your time. This television station also has been touched in a personal way by this tragedy. William Steckman, WNBC's transmitter engineer, was at work on the 104th floor, World Trade Center Tower 1, when the first plane struck the tower. We had contact with him after impact, but we lost contact shortly afterward and have not heard from him since. If you've seen him or know his whereabouts, perhaps at a triage center, please contact us here at WNBC. The phone number is 212-664-2903, or you can email us. Our website is www.wnbc.com.
Chuck, General Electric, the parent company of WNBC, is making a large charitable contribution to the families of the city workers killed in the World Trade Center tragedy. Today, Mayor Giuliani paused to say thank you.
Situation. GE, the CEO of GE, Jeff Imholt, told us that he is going to donate $10 million to a fund for the families of the police, fire, and other emergency workers that tragically turn out to have lost their lives in this situation.
Well, it's hard to step back when you've been sitting here, as we have all this time, doing the hour-by-hour, element-by-element story, and take a look at the magnitude of the disaster and the number of tragic stories accumulating one upon the other. All of these people who now, thousands of people who still have no idea.